Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Scaling SaaS Podcast, brought to you by Zeno Digital Consulting Group. I'm your host, Brad Cavanaugh, and each week we sit down with SaaS leaders who are doing remarkable things in growth, innovation, and customer success. Our goal is simple: to uncover what's really working inside SaaS companies so you can take away insights that help you scale smarter. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Trevor Ewen, the Chief Operating Officer of Qbench. Trevor and his partner acquired Qbench back in 2022, and in just the first year under their leadership, they grew the company by 50% while maintaining strong margins. Qbench is a cloud-based laboratory information management system that helps testing labs automate their entire workflow and eliminate spreadsheets and paper tracking. They're rated the #1 LIMS platform in North America on G2. But what I really want to explore today is how Trevor's thinking about company culture, specifically how you evolve it when you're scaling fast, operating remotely, and transitioning from a founder-led startup to a professionally managed growth company. Trevor, thanks for being here and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Brad.
Yeah, I really appreciate you jumping on. Why don't you, I touched on it for a second, but why don't you give me a little bit about your journey? I mean, it sounds like you went from software engineer to entrepreneur to acquiring a company. How does all that happen?
Yeah, it's about right. I think it I guess aligns with a lot of my experience, but also some of the things I wanted to do. So I spent a career kind of doing software development in the traditional way it's been done up until recent AI developments, writing code and being in charge of people who have to do that. And that's the main deliverable that we do. I think I was lucky to be in cloud software from a time when it was kind of nascent and then it became the main thing. And just, had some, I'll say mostly just luck along the way, because I don't think a lot of people make super brilliant strategic decisions in their early 20s, but, worked in cloud software development, had a line in a lot of open source technologies and a lot of things that eventually went straight into the mainstream. And contrary to what's happening to a lot of new software engineers today, I entered a job market that was kind of an escalating ramp of opportunity. So it was a great place to be, because it was just kind of the high point of software engineering in the US, probably in the last 15 years, in terms of demand in the market and opportunities for people to do that. But it's easy to get pigeonholed, especially if you're pretty talented at that stuff. Then you're always the developer. And I just recognized that going farther in business was going to mean doing more of my own working in operations, ultimately developing more of a perspective on how to do the people part of an organization, which I think is actually the most exciting and fulfilling part of doing it. So, went to business school with that in mind. How do I get myself out of this pigeonhole situation that a lot of developers seem to get them into? And I don't think it was just business school that did it, but it was that gave me the template and the process for doing some of the discovery of what I wanted to do. And we could talk about how we got into acquisitions as a strategy, but it ultimately was I thought the right vehicle for me to do what I wanted to do and have a bit of a career pivot.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. What was it, to touch on the acquisition piece? What was it about Qbench that you saw that made that the right business for you to acquire?
We'd been almost ruthlessly scientific about the process, which, it's
Sure.
probably our luck that we got a scientific software company then. But we were very focused on listing out the attributes that a good target would have based on a mix of factors. One is just the durability in the market, that we saw that there's these certain kinds of, irrefutable market facts that are just helpful to have. For instance, selling B2B is, easier than consumer SaaS. I think most people would agree with that. And it's not to say that there's not great consumer business out there, but it's a harder game to play. Another example is more durable industries. So, when you're actually the system of record, when you're the key system, it's a lot harder for you to just get yanked out of there versus some kind of ancillary system. Other things that we looked at too, like high API usage. We had industries that we favored just from the nature of the work. I'll be honest. I think we'd be less excited to do tons of government compliance type of work versus, actually helping labs operate more efficiently. I think there's just more to wake up for in the morning with that. So Qbench hit a lot of our characteristics. You're never going to score 100%, right? That just will not happen in acquisitions. But this is easily the highest scoring thing that we got this far along with, and so then it was an easy win once we had good founder buyer fit, right? Which is really that's probably the axis that most deals really hinge on, regardless of what people say. Like at the end of the day, it's does the seller actually trust you to run their business? So you can find a perfect fit, you can have your attributes right, you can develop your capital strategy, but if that part doesn't come together, then you're not going to get the deal done.
Is the seller still involved, or are they completely out of the business now?
Yeah, he is to the extent he wants to be, and that's exactly what we wanted for him, right? So, he's able to contribute in the way that he needs to, and he is unlike so many other companies. I can just say this flatly with no caveats. He's a huge blessing to have, available to us and a resource. Sometimes the seller can be a thorn in your side. That is 100% not the case with Qbench. So we're very fortunate to have that, and so he gets to still focus on some of the other things he's doing. He's actually, he runs another business right now, and that's doing well and something that he wants to be focused on. But then he still can have the level of involvement he wants, and some of the insight he brings a lot of value still on the product side of the business. So we go to him for a lot of advice and insight there.
Yeah, speaking of the product, I mean, for people kind of not in this lab space, what is that transformation that you create for your customers? I mean, kind of paint the picture of a before someone's using Qbench and then after someone's using Qbench.
Right. So before they're in any number of states, so they're maybe in a kind of pre-modernization phase. So they maybe are just using paper, like analog processes, and you will see that in much older, much more traditional industries where they really, usually new executive or new lab manager comes in and says, okay, we got to do a big modernization effort. And then looking at LIMS is a part of that process. The most common would be that they have something cobbled together, which is going to be a mix of spreadsheets and some limited automations and, some of the analyses that they want to put together, but it's very manual jumping from process to process. So they may really have part of their worksheets dialed in on this spreadsheet, but then producing the certificate of analysis for the customer or something like that is then going to some Word document, and they've got a lab tech who's filling that out or some office administrator who's doing that kind of work. So that happens with a lot of businesses where before you have the software in place, you have some kind of cobbled together process. The last, which is still surprisingly less common, although we think it's going to become more common in the upcoming years, is where we do a rip and replace. They have another LIMS that they're not happy with. They want to move to Qbench. And the opportunity there is really that many of the legacy LIMS providers are on-prem. So the cost of maintaining the infrastructure is huge. And, speaking to the kind of cloud topic that I mentioned before, it's very appealing to just say, hey, we're not in the business of IT management. We're a laboratory, right? So let's just have a platform in the cloud. Not only can you usually win on the cost side, but I think it's just in general headache. And it's more modern than those platforms too. So a lot of times you'll have a changing of the guard with the lab manager themselves, and you'll see that push to, hey, time to get rid of the old system, time to get rid of the spreadsheets, time to get rid of the analog process. And that's often a moment where we can come in and be very, very effective in that process.
Yeah, that's a big switch. I mean, I'm old enough. I actually worked for, I don't know if anybody remembers, but Siebel Systems back in the day. They kind of were the 500-pound gorilla in the CRM space. So, I mean, Tom Siebel essentially kind of invented CRM, but it was all on-prem, right? Client server on-prem. And when Mark Benioff started Salesforce.com, that was a huge disruption in the market. And, having that ease of onboarding, installation, getting started with a product that's SaaS via on-prem is it's just a huge win for most companies.
Yeah, yeah, you have to convince them, and sometimes you get internal dissent. Oftentimes, those
Sure.
those IT managers are the ones who are most resistant because they may see their job going a different direction, and I can't exactly speak for them. That may even be the case, but ultimately, it's all about just getting. I think there's a trend in general to get businesses out of businesses that they're not doing right. So in the same way that we outsource HR to a PEO, right? Because I don't want to be doing benefits negotiation. It's not where we get our edge. It's not where we get our leverage. And we hire people all over the country, right? So we just need that flexibility. There's no there's no useful way to convince me that we should bring that in-house, at least at the current stage. And so that's the similar kind of change management conversation we have with laboratories is, do you really want to be in this IT management game? Now, that is a very small minority of our prospects. It turns out that the middle part of the distribution is the spreadsheets and cobbled together systems. So we're not even often fighting against an on-prem system. We're just fighting against a kind of disorganized, more manual process.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned hiring. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to the culture, right? So you acquire, or you go back in the past, you acquire 2022, you've got an existing team, existing culture. How do you approach that transition? I mean, that seems to me, I've been involved in companies that have been acquired.
Yeah.
It is a huge challenge. What are your thoughts on how do you approach that type of transition?
Yeah. There's probably about two main arguments on either side of the polarity, right? So one argument says, and this happens more in distressed buyouts. Qbench was by no means a distressed buyout, but if you are in a situation where the company is maybe 30 or 60 days from insolvency, the folks in that world tend to be very focused on, you got to fire fast, you got to move the org around, you got to pretty much just change culture by brute force, right? And those, if you think about people who've gone through what they may label as bad acquisitions, that's often what they're talking about, is a management who had to come in and deal with this insolvency problem. And sometimes, depending where you are in the organization, you don't really see that. You don't see that the company is 60 days away from going bankrupt. And, the fact that you were moved around or potentially even lost your job might be the thing that actually changed that. We were on the other side of the ledger. So what we decided to do is, be very, very stable, right? And to make people recognize that the best thing we could gain from them in that first period was their trust and recognition that we're actually trying to do the best by everybody, have a good relationship with them, develop their careers, and grow with the team we have. I think we had a really good retention in terms of the team. We had a couple people leave, and that was all right. In all honesty, that it's probably better for people to self-select out than to maybe have to go through some kind of performance management process or something like that. And
Sure.
then, ultimately, as we got confidence under us, we started to realize some of the departments were not correctly allocated, right? Over allocated and under allocated in both directions. But a lot of the way we solved that challenge was actually to move people around, to recognize where people maybe had a competency where they could do multiple things or maybe work in another part of the organization. So that was a big piece of it. And then in 2023, we did do a downsize. So we did a layoff in the summer of 2023. And that was the catalyst we used to do other departmental changes. I think all of them, it's hard to say that everything was a success, but I think at that time, we made the right choices at the time. And so then from there, we were able to use that foundation to then start more selectively hiring, pushing the culture in certain areas. We've had a lot of success with having vendors and contractors come in and set the template before we make a full-time job out of it, which is really useful. And we've even had, this is a cool one, but former customers come to work for us. So customers who've used our product in the laboratory really enjoyed the experience, kind of saw our company culture from a distance, and wanted more of that. So we've had that happen a couple times, believe it or not.
It's funny that actually happened to me. Like want to no, my first kind of job in the technology space was, I'm going to date myself here, was with Compact Computer. Um, so if you know that name,
Oh,
you're
I remember
somewhat
Compact. My neighbor was a Compact salesman. Yeah.
yeah. So we actually had Siebel come in and redo our CRM system. And so then I actually was so enamored by it, I actually left Compaq and started to go work as a consultant for Siebel. So yeah, I could definitely see how that happens.
Yeah, and for
Uh,
people who work in laboratories, they don't often get offered remote jobs. Turns out there's not many remote laboratory jobs. So we found that a huge lever for people looking for maybe a bit more of that flexibility, that quality of life, because we hire, a good portion of our customer operations staff is people who've worked in laboratories. That's part of the qualification for the job. So
so you mentioned remote. I mean, you guys are remote first.
yeah, we were remote first. That was always the plan. A big component of that was that, we joke about it, but both Nicholas and myself, we don't live in the same place, and I don't think we will live in the same place anytime soon. So we always knew at least one of us was going to be remote. But then once you start breaking that, breaking the shell of that egg, I suppose it just applies to everybody. And I think I'm not one of those people who says it's the best thing no matter what, and there's no trade-off. I mean, the trade-off is the camaraderie and lack of spending time together, but the talent we get access to is amazing. And we do have to hire people who are very independent, high agency types, right? You know, if you have a lot of peer-based accountability needs where you need someone looking over your shoulder or, you know, clocking your hours all day long to stay focused, then it's probably not a great job for you. And it's not a judgmental thing. Some people, you know, I have good friends who are like, look, I can't do the remote work thing. I'd be messing around all day, right? I need that accountability, and that's fine. But this is probably not a great place for someone like that to work. So we tend to find, you know, independent, high agency, highly motivated people. But then the advantages are, look, you live wherever you want. We got, you know, people who are just taking long extended vacations, depending on what team they're on, and you know that's fine. We had members of the team who were married to people stationed at bases, you know, all over the U.S., all over the world, and able to go visit them for extended periods of time, right? So all those things come to light. You know, I've been super happy to see people just kind of feeling that flexibility to move around the country, and we have no plan to do some kind of return to office mandate or something like that. We wouldn't even know where the office would be, right? Because we're so distributed.
Right.
So, you know, we've embraced that. It's not, yes, our acquisition corresponded with post COVID, but this was always the plan for us, and I think I think it still really is. I understand why a lot of big businesses and corporations are going back to return to office. I see some of the productivity challenges they're dealing with, but for companies in our size range, man, this is a huge lever. It's a huge lever to be able to hire anywhere.
No, it is huge. And I remember first being really introduced to a kind of a full remote work environment when I was reading about 37 Signals back in the
Yep.
day. They were,
Yep.
you know, it kind of came up as a real popular software company, and I think their founder was very. I think he wrote a book, if I remember correctly, and
Yep.
so that was my first experience of just like planning it. And then after COVID, obviously that just completely exploded, and you know some people went back, and I think your point is incredibly valid. I mean, everybody's got their own working style, and if somebody can do it, great, but if not, then you know you find the environment that's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think we are going to see a bifurcation related to size of business. The challenges with alignment and decision making. I mean, I've worked for very big companies, right? And I just understand why remote is so much more of a challenge for those organizations. But
Yeah,
you know,
completely.
fast moving, high agency group of people can be very trusted on their own. There's no better. And a lot of people they'll think it's kind of cynically that we want to save on rent, and that's like a small part of the benefit. The big part of the benefit is recruiting anywhere. That's the real benefit. The idea that I'm not constrained to a zip code or a metro area for recruitment, and the millions of other you know challenges that alleviates. Right? I can't tell you how many people. So I was in New York City during COVID, and um, very high cost of living in New York City, and how many people I knew with kids and also with families who pretty much took that moment to say, maybe we're going remote forever, right? And then they just moved to Texas or Florida or Arizona, wherever they had more space, and you know that return to work mandate became a really interesting pivot point for them. And you know, a good percentage of those folks said, nope, I'm not going back. I'm just going to find another job down here and do that. So the companies that are willing to offer that, I think they can do a lot on the retention side, and you gain it. It's not exactly an economic thing, but I think you gain some just goodwill from the employees. They recognize that that's almost like part of the comp, the fact that they get to choose where to live and don't have to be in one of the super high cost metros where you just have to pump their wages to make sure they can afford housing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when I worked for VMware, I mean, when I was hiring for my team, it was all, you know, most of it had to be in the Bay Area, right? And that's tough. I mean, you
Yeah,
definitely limit your scope, but when you can widen that aperture to literally the entire United States, and in some cases, you know, outside of the United States, that just definitely makes it a lot easier to find good talent.
yeah, absolutely.
Let's shift a little bit. Let's get a little bit more tactical, kind of operational here. So, you know, you guys grew incredibly fast. But what did you find as your biggest kind of operational bottlenecks or pain points that you had to solve to enable that level of growth?
Well, I think, you know, hiring is hard to do at the right tempo if you want quality, right? So we've often felt like by the time we're hiring a role, we are in need of that role that week. And that's something that we're trying to anticipate a little bit better ahead of demand. A big thing that we learned in 2023 is we also don't want to be so aggressive on the hiring that there's always a layoff around every corner because we've just so overinvested in a team. So there is a certain amount of, I wouldn't call it seasonality, but there's some cyclicality to our year as it goes. A lot of that has to do with some like how the budget cycles work. And so for people who work on customer facing operations, we just want to make sure they always have a full plate and we don't get down to a point where we're looking around and people don't have as much to do, right? And just to ensure the fact that, as with any SaaS business, our cost is labor, right? There's not really much else we can cut. And so it's always that reminder that we're trying to keep the team there and trying not to, the phrase I heard I really like is trying not to cut muscle, right? When we have to, actually cut back on things. We've also structured better in terms of how we do it. I mean, one of the things that I introduced was trying to make sure that we have one role in particular that has the most cyclicality to it, and make sure we have contractors on the front line of that role, right? So that we can deleverage them before we have to get to any employees. And so just thinking about your staffing in terms of the elasticity of demand for it. So I'd say, yeah, the hiring's big. We've been so lucky, so fortunate. Team is really leveled up on the quality of hiring, the quality of interviewing compared to what we saw when we came in. But I don't think that's a muscle you ever stop working, because as we get bigger, that's pretty much the main strategic decision we're making, is who we're hiring to do the critical work. And I would really like to not only shorten the cycle, so really be able to get great roles filled in 2 to 4 weeks, which would be pretty good by our count, but then also start filling that role 2 to 4 weeks before we need it, right? And so get that point where you're getting that person to start their job, or better yet, be fully onboarded and trained by the time you actually need them. And a lot of that just has to do with really good, reliable forecasting and then anticipating the demand. So I'd say that's been the big one that I certainly think a lot about.
Assuming actually, you answered an earlier question for me, because I wasn't sure if when you look at learning or laboratory information management system, do you have to say LIMS or do you actually say LIMS? So you said LIMS, so
Hey, either.
that's good.
Yeah. People
That
using
answered
it.
the question, actually how to pronounce it. But I'm assuming LIMS, there's a lot of automation, within the lab software. So you're familiar with that sort of, kind of automating processes, et cetera. How do you think about automation within your own operations, like automation of sales or marketing or customer success or operations? Or have you put any time and effort and thought into how that's going to look in the future, especially in
Yeah.
today's, the AI world that we're in today?
This is probably the single biggest tool in my toolkit, because I come from a development background. So that's always the way I approach these problems. To some extent, I even will overdo it at times, where I think I was offering to automate something this week that, probably takes somebody 4 minutes a day. And they're like, no, don't worry about it. Right. It's fine. You don't need to do that one. But yeah, that's always where I'm looking for some kind of operational advantage. And so what I do is I run a lot of internal business servers that are just doing any number of things. They have a lot of jobs that are going on, or they're processing data for demo requests, or shoving stuff into the CRM, or doling out tasks to people. I mean, I could fill up the rest of the time we have here just talking about any number of the different things we have going on. How has AI affected that? It's kind of a little suggested in your question. It's made it faster, right? So I'm really, really impressed with the AI assisted coding. I've been using a mix of Cursor and Claude Code for stuff like this. Is incredible, because I have this is not super complicated type of workflows that I'm doing. I'm usually saying, hey, this system's got this data type. It looks like this. It's coming in this way. And then I need to push it out here and do something with that. Right. And so the coding agents are incredible with that stuff. So I felt like my throughput has gone up quite a bit. And then in terms of using AI as part of the strategy, we will even use the OpenAI API to actually process some of the things we're doing. So we're taking examples of our sales discovery calls from Gong. Are you familiar with Gong? It's like a call recording platform. So we pull the
Oh, yeah,
transcripts
yeah.
from Gong. So we have an automated process that pulls the transcripts from Gong and then sends it out to the OpenAI ChatGPT API to, go and analyze what happened during this discovery call. And that allows us to do kind of replay, watch game footage and effectively see what happened in the different sales call processes. So it's incredible as a learning tool, as a tool for making me move faster, as a tool for making the whole team move faster. We definitely lean into it as an operational strategy, and we got OpenAI Pro licenses for everybody on the team. No questions asked. The newest, most junior employee gets that on day one because we're just expecting them to use it.
I just noticed that Claude just came out with 4.5 Sonnet. They're claiming some pretty good numbers there. Have you tested it out yet?
I may have inadvertently because I think Cursor might be using it in the background. I don't know when they came out with it, but I'm at a point where
Yeah,
the it's moving so fast that it's moving faster than I like. Already Sonnet is basically doing everything I need, so I'm not
yeah.
feeling like I have to push it that much. But I do keep an eye on that for my developers, the people on the product team who I do think are dealing with more complicated problems. So I want to make sure they have the latest and greatest. And we've seen a bit of a bifurcation. I told the team to pick out what we wanted to do. Initially, we standardized on OpenAI and ChatGPT, and I think for a lot of the run of the mill stuff, document creation and all, it's been good. I can see the developers moving more towards Claude now, which is totally fine. Right? We knew we were going to have some departmental level bifurcation, but I wanted to make sure we were aligned and at least not everyone choose your own adventure, right? And I do think we get some benefit from the custom GPTs. I mean, we're just able to load so much uh, content rich documentation into these and, create these custom GPTs that, uh, restore 2 to 3 hours of my day that I would otherwise spend answering questions about our compliance program or something like that.
Yeah. No, it is moving so fast. It's outrageous to try to keep up with it. Excuse me. You mentioned sales. I mean, what's the market like for, from a laboratory specific, like what is your go-to-market motion and how are you um, generating and qualifying leads today in today's market?
Yeah. I mean, laboratories are looking, right? So, it's we rarely see a buyer who we need to convince that they need a limbs, and then it's just a matter of really on the qualification. We've been honing in more our definition around our ICP and making sure that we're actually serving the best fit customers. A lot of it actually just really comes down to are they dedicated to the process, right? And the process that will enable and empower them to get this up and running. I don't, you know, it it would be odd for me to spend. I run an accounting system, right? It'd be very odd for me to spend 2 to 3 months doing that to implement an accounting system. I would just say, like, we need to get this in, and we should be able to send invoices tomorrow. Laboratories require a little more fine tuning, so they do a little bit more on the front end, and so we don't mind that, but we just say, look, you got to be dedicated to this process because when you don't dedicate the resources, you end up unhappy. We end up unhappy. The whole thing kind of doesn't really work. So we're doing a lot more on the qualification to say, what's your level of commitment to this process? And a lot of times it's just like us. It's the culture of the organization, right? You can have two labs that do the exact same kind of thing, two blood testing labs. And one has decided that they want to manage really good, efficient, cost-effective processes and increase their throughput. And the other one has decided that they probably should modernize because why not? But they don't really care about it to any significant degree. And there's a world of difference. It's what's going to actually happen with those two customers, right? So we prefer the former, and we're just doing more work to try and qualify that. In terms of the channels, it's still pretty sales driven. This is a market that, as much as I would love it to be a product driven cycle, it's not there yet. We believe that there's going to be a point where smaller labs might be able to start doing that self-servicing, um, you know, more standardized use cases. Think like small environmental labs or water labs or something like that. But the bigger, more complicated ones are always going to be more like a sales driven cycle. And yeah, they're usually talking to us because they're looking for a solution, right? There's no gotcha sales tactics or trying to convince them that they actually need this, right? They're usually sold on the needing it question, and then it's just a question of their commitment and what their choice is. Every now and then we're in a head to head, but that happens less than you'd think. Oftentimes it's us versus the existing process.
Yeah. All right, we're kind of coming into the amount of time here for the spot. So just looking kind of forward in the future, right? Over the next 12, 24 months, I mean, what are you most excited about for Qbench?
mean, we're growing the team, right? And I've been really happy that there are big decisions happening that I am not involved in, and that's not supposed to be an ominous message. Like people have cut me out of the loop. It's that people are taking initiative and doing things that are growing our business, and I don't have to be a direct sign off to it like I would have had to be in 2022. So that's great. That means we've been able to delegate a lot of authority downward. The team has opportunities for growth. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And then I'm just excited about getting people really pumped for the great business makers sort of things. And what I mean by that is, look, we're going to try and be an awesome limbs. We're going to try and be the best in the market. I think we've already achieved that to a certain degree. But what I want to be is this company that people really want to work at, right? Like this magnetic place. And we started to get some good confirmation on that. Had just people refer people in to say, hey, this guy's looking for a really good culture to work at, and I think it'd be a good fit for you. And it's like, oh, interesting. Where did you get the idea that we have such a good culture? And I think a big part of it is they hear things from our employees, from other people they know, and that's really encouraging. That's really validating. And so I hope we can keep having that, throughout growth. There's this balance of we've got to build the systems. Things will get ever so slightly more administratively complex, but you don't want that to be a burden on people. You want the culture to be helping them do the best work of their career without hampering them down. So I'm excited about that. That's the stuff I live for, is just kind of making sure the internal operations are working well and making sure people are enjoying their jobs.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Trevor. So from like an operations guy, it's a thrill to kind of hear you talk so much about people, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
most of the ops guys. I mean, I'm an ops guy at heart, a process guy. But building that culture has obviously been super important from you, and I think it's obviously showing success. And it's great to hear that you're building something like that. One last, because I'm an ops guy, one last question,
Right.
and we'll wind it down. So if you could wave like a magic wand and fix one kind of operational challenge that you have today, what would it be?
Oh boy. Well, this will get you into a totally different debate, but I would love it if employers had nothing to do with health insurance in the United States. So, whatever system you want to have, that's up for debate. All I'm saying is the fact that I am for some reason in that mix is a source of endless pointlessness. And let me just say, I think our team has done a really good job with it. Like, we don't have a lot of benefits related snafus, but every year we're doing annual renewals, and I'm thinking, why are we involved in this? Like, why do we have to know the specifics about what's going on with people and their different health conditions and how many kids they have and all that? So I would love that to be in some other realm. You know, choose your adventure. Fully single payer, fully privatized, but just not at the behest of employers. So that's one that I think we can get off our plate. And I think that speaks to another theme. Is I'm constantly trying to get us out of what are the games we're playing that we are not set up to win at. Right. And that would be a great example of one. And we do fine, right? Mostly because we have a PEO negotiating on our behalf. But, you know, any of the processes that are going on inside the building, that inside the metaphorical building, because we're fully remote, but, inside the company, that are just not what we're made to win. I'd rather get those off our plate.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting. You touched my. I actually, when my degree is actually in history and government, and you hit a nerve there about how that came about and why we still have it, and from a government perspective. But it's actually kind of a fascinating story, why health insurance is just such a integral part of a business, providing it, as a benefit and all that. It's a tax issue and all that stuff. So,
Yep.
but I hear you. It's a huge challenge for a lot of companies.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but a small problem to have. Like I said, we've done well with it, and that's why I just feel like no challenge is too big at this point, because if that's the worst thing, then I'm doing all right.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, Trevor, this has actually been really fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time to share your story and your insights on building a culture while scaling at such a high growth. Before we wrap up, and you want to tell anybody, tell people where they can learn more about Qbench. If there are any lab managers or directors listening, what should they do next?
Yeah, I mean, lab managers, just go and schedule a demo. We'd love to talk to you, love to see what you're doing, and we're putting out a lot of good resources. So I think longer term, we would also like to just become a trusted resource in laboratory automation. Whether or not people decide to go with Qbench, here's the thought leadership side of it. So that's something we're building out on the marketing and content side. For me, you could check out trevorewen.com. I'm pretty active on X, and yeah, just talking about some of my operational stuff over there. So it keeps me from pontificating too much to my family members. So I have another outlet for it. So that's what I do. And yeah, happy to people want to send me a message individually over there, or if you go to trevorewen.com, you'll get links to all the different places you can see me, like LinkedIn and that.
That's great. And so finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone who's building or scaling a SaaS business. Trevor, I really appreciate it. Thanks again for being here. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much, Brad.